Welcome to the Sleep Paralysis tapes. Settle into the dark, pull the covers close, and let the heavy silence fill your room. Tonight, we descend into chilling tales of the unexplained. Before the screen fades to pitch black, I invite you to become part of this archive. If you have your own terrifying encounters, please contact me and I will narrate your story in a future tape. If these shadows bring you comfort, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Now, close your eyes. Do not look at the foot of your bed. Just listen and let us begin. She thought she'd gotten lucky. You should know luck like that. It's never free. Her name was Chloe Thibodeau. She was 26. A history grad student from Baton Rouge who'd landed the kind of sublet that doesn't exist in the French Quarter. Not at that price. Not on Royal Street. 1128 Royal Street, Unit 3B. A third-floor walk up in a converted townhouse with original hard pine floors and a tiny iron balcony overlooking the street. She moved in on a Tuesday in early May 2025 with 2 suitcases and a head full of archive notes. Her research was on antebellum New Orleans. The social histories, the architecture, the darker corners, and her new apartment was right in the middle of it all. Just 120 yards from her front door stood the LaLaurie Mansion. You know the one. 1140 Royal, the white column townhouse with the terrible screaming history. For Chloe, it was a dream. To live so close to the subject. To feel the history in the bricks. She'd tell her friends it was like living inside her own dissertation. The apartment itself was charming. Small, sure. A living room that bled into a galley kitchen, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and the bedroom. The bedroom was where she fell in love. It was dominated by a beautiful old cheval mirror. A full-length standing mirror in a frame of dark carved wood with a slight tilt to it. The glass was flawless. Not a single speck or warp. It had a weight, a presence. It felt like it belonged. She'd spin in front of it, admiring the way her clothes looked against the antique backdrop. She thought it gave the room character. She established a routine. Mornings at the archives on Chartres Street. Afternoons writing at a small desk by the bedroom window. Evenings with a glass of wine on the balcony, listening to the distant thrum of Bourbon Street. It was perfect. It was quiet. For the first 3 nights, she slept like the dead. The 4th night was different. It was 3 a.m. The exact, specific kind of quiet that only happens in the very oldest parts of a city. No sirens. No music. Just the heavy, humid silence. Chloe woke up. Not the slow, groggy waking from a dream. She was just abruptly awake. And she couldn't move. It wasn't panic at first. It was confusion. A thick, woolly pressure held her down on the mattress. She tried to lift her head. Nothing. Tried to wiggle a finger. Nothing. Her breathing was shallow, tight in her chest. This is where people tell themselves it's just a dream. A bad bit of sleep, but Chloe was fully, terribly conscious. And she felt it. The sensation of not being alone. The room was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of a power strip under her desk. She couldn't turn her head. Her eyes were the only thing she could move. They darted to the left, toward the closet. Nothing. To the right, toward the door. Nothing. But the feeling. It was a pressure on the back of her neck, a cold, specific density in the air at the foot of the bed. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was occupied. She lay there, frozen for what felt like an hour. It was probably 90 seconds. And then, as suddenly as it came, the pressure lifted. The feeling of another presence in the room evaporated. She could move. She sat bolt upright in bed, gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs. She flicked on the bedside lamp. The room was just her room. The desk, the books, the beautiful cheval mirror in the corner, reflecting a perfectly normal, scared young woman sitting in a rumpled bed. She got up, checked the lock on the door, checked the window. Everything was secure. She told herself it was stress. Too much coffee. The weird dislocation of sleeping in a new, old place. She drank a glass of water, got back into bed, and eventually fell into a fitful sleep. When she woke in the morning, the sun was streaming through the window. The memory of the night felt thin, silly. A bad dream. She made coffee, stood in front of that beautiful mirror as she got ready, and didn't think twice about it. That's how it starts, you see, with something you can explain away. With a reason. A bad meal, a long day, an overactive imagination. You cling to the reason. Because the alternative is that the quiet in your new, perfect apartment isn't just quiet, it's listening. And Chloe's reason was about to run out. 3 nights later, it happened again. The same dead hour. 3 a.m. The same thick, humid silence. But this time, Chloe didn't just wake up. She was pulled, yanked from a dreamless sleep into a state of pure, petrified awareness. And she was pinned. You need to understand something about sleep paralysis. It's not just not moving. It's a physical weight. A concrete slab on your chest. You try to scream. Your vocal cords are just off, disconnected. You're a prisoner inside your own skin. Chloe lay there, rigid. Her eyes were open. The faint blue-tinged moonlight from the balcony door lit the room. She saw the shape of her desk, the dark lump of her clothes on the chair, and there, in the corner, the cheval mirror. It was just a darker rectangle in the dark. The pressure on her neck returned. That feeling of her breath, cold and stagnant on the back of her neck. She couldn't turn her head to see. She couldn't. All she could do was strain her eyes toward the mirror. At first, it was just a blur, a pool of shadow. But as her eyes adjusted, she saw the outline of her own bed reflected in the glass. And on that bed, a shape, lying still. She was staring at her own reflection from an angle in the middle of the night. It was unnerving, but it was just a mirror. Then she noticed her face. The moonlight caught it just enough. The reflection's face was hers. But it was worn, weathered, like a photograph left in the sun. The skin seemed looser. There were lines around the eyes that hadn't been there when she checked her makeup before bed, a subtle sag to the jawline, as if 10 hard years had passed in 10 hard seconds. Her mind scrambled. A trick of the light, the stress. It had to be. That's when she saw the movement. Not in the room, but in the mirror. In the dark space of the reflection, just behind the image of her own paralyzed body, something shifted. A deeper shadow peeled itself from the wall. It resolved into a shape. A woman. She was gaunt, terribly thin, dressed in what looked like tattered, colorless rags that hung from her frame. Her hair was a wild, matted cloud around a face of sharp angles and hollows. But the eyes had a dull, reflective shine. They were fixed, not on the room, but on Chloe's reflection in the glass. And at her ankles, just visible below the ragged hem, was metal. Iron. The glint of leg shackles, heavy and dark. The woman stood there in that reflected space behind the bed, staring at the back of Chloe's reflected head. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just was. This is where it gets bad. The mind can explain away a feeling, a pressure, a sound. It cannot explain this. A specific, detailed, silent witness standing in your mirror, in a room you know is empty. Chloe's heart was a frantic animal in a cage. She tried with every atom of her will to twitch a finger, to gasp, to break the lock holding her down. Nothing. She was forced to watch. To see her own aged face in the foreground and that hollow-eyed woman in the background in a perfect, silent tableau of dread. The clock on her bedside table ticked over to 3:15 a.m. As suddenly as it came, the pressure vanished. The paralysis broke. She sucked in a ragged, loud gasp of air, her body curling inward. She scrambled back against the headboard, her eyes glued to the real mirror in the corner. It was just a mirror, showing a terrified 26-year-old woman in a rumpled t-shirt clutching her blankets. The room was empty. Her hands shook so badly she fumbled her phone 3 times. The rational part of her, the historian, kicked in. Evidence. She needed evidence. She pointed the phone at the mirror, at her own pale, wide-eyed face, and took a picture. The flash went off, blinding in the dark room. She looked at the screen. There she was. Her face. Young. Her own. No new lines. No sagging skin. The relief was so violent it felt like nausea. But in the background of the photo, in the reflection of the dark part of the room behind her, there was a blur, a smudge of light and shadow. It was roughly the height and shape of a person. It wasn't there when she took the picture. She had looked directly at that spot. It was empty. You see, the mind will cling to a reason. A bad dream. Stress. But a photograph is a time-stamped piece of data. That's a different kind of problem. That's a fact that doesn't fit. Chloe didn't sleep again that night. She sat on her bed with every light on, staring at that photo until the sun came up, staring at the blur, trying to make it be a trick of the flash, a dust mote, anything. But she knew. She'd seen the shackles. She'd seen the hollow eyes. The mirror wasn't just an antique. It was a window, and something was looking back. Now, this is where a reasonable person would have left. They'd pack a bag, call a friend, sleep on a couch. But Chloe wasn't just a person. She was a historian. And a historian faced with impossible evidence doesn't run. She documents. The episodes became a ritual, a cruel, punctual liturgy. Every 3 or 4 nights, like clockwork, the silence would thicken at 3 a.m. The weight would press down, and her eyes would be dragged every single time to that mirror. She stopped fighting the paralysis. In a horrible way, she leaned into it. She'd keep her phone clutched in her hand when she went to bed, her thumb resting on the screen. When the pressure locked her in, when she saw her reflection begin to shift and wither, she'd use the last spark of motor control in her fingertip. Tap. The camera would open. Tap. The flash would fire. She created a folder. She called it Research. It was a timeline of decay. The first photo was from that second night. It was a blur. The next one, taken a week later, was clearer. In it, her reflection's face was lined, not subtly, deep grooves around the mouth. Crow's feet carved into the skin. Her hair at the temples looked thinner, wispy. The chained woman in the background was closer. She was no longer a shape against the wall. She was standing just behind the reflection of the bed. You could see the texture of the rags, the terrible hollows of her cheeks. Another week passed. Another photo. This time, the reflection's skin was papery. Liver spots dotted the cheeks and forehead. The hair was starkly gray and receding. The eyes in the reflection weren't Chloe's eyes anymore. They were old eyes, tired and full of a pain she'd never felt. And the woman. She was at the foot of the reflected bed now. The iron shackles were clear. She wasn't just standing. She was staring. Her head was tilted, studying the aged thing that was Chloe's reflection. You need to understand the math of it. Roughly 20 years of aging per episode. In 3 weeks, the reflection in her time-stamped photos had aged 60 years. She was looking at an image of herself in her 80s, a self-portrait from a future she hadn't earned. Her daytime life began to fray. The exhaustion was bone deep. She'd nap at her desk in the archives, her head jerking up, heart pounding. Her real skin in the sunlight took on a sallow, translucent quality, like the life was being siphoned out of her between 3 and 3:15 a.m. Her friends asked if she was sick. She'd say it was the stress of her thesis. One afternoon, in a fog of caffeine and dread, she made the connection. It wasn't inspiration. It was horror. She was cross-referencing descriptions from the coroner's reports after the LaLaurie fire in 1834, the bodies found in the attic. The slaves. The descriptions were clinical and dry, advanced decrepitude inconsistent with stated age. severe malnutrition, evidence of prolonged physical restraint. She pulled up the latest photo on her laptop, the one with the papery skin, the deep-set, hopeless eyes. She looked from the screen to the century-old words on the page. The match wasn't just close, it was exact. The historical records were describing the face in her phone. That's the thing about ghosts. We think they want to scare us. Sometimes I think they just want to be seen. To have their specific suffering witnessed. This woman in the mirror wasn't showing Chloe a monster. She was showing Chloe herself, reduced to what she had been. A thing worn down. A body in chains. Chloe closed the laptop. The room was silent. It was only 4 p.m. But the silence felt like the 3 a.m. kind. Occupied! She had her evidence now. Undeniable, time-stamped, corroborated by history. And it was worse than having none at all. Because when you can explain a thing, you can contain it. This was a fact with no box to put it in. It just sat there, in the dark of her phone, growing older every time she looked. And in the back of every photo, the woman with the shackles took one silent step closer. Chloe didn't pack a bag. She didn't call a friend. She did what any historian would do when faced with a primary source of horror. She went to the source. Mr. Saunier, the landlord, was a man who saw property, not history. He lived in a neat little bungalow in Metairie. When Chloe showed up on his doorstep, pale and shaking, he just sighed, like she was complaining about a leaky faucet. She didn't show him the photos. She just asked about the mirror, where it came from. "Oh, that old thing," he said, waving a hand, "came with the place. My granddaddy bought a whole lot of furniture from an estate auction in the 20s. Upscale liquidation. That mirror was in the lot, said it came from one of the big houses on Royale. A real piece of local history." Chloe's mouth was very dry. "Which house?" Mr. Saunier shrugged like it was trivia. "The LaLaurie place, I think he said." "Yeah. After the scandal died down, they sold off contents for decades. My granddaddy got a good price. A piece of local history." He said it with pride. Chloe didn't say another word. She just turned and walked back to her car. The drive back to the quarter was a blur of white noise and a single crystalline thought. It wasn't haunted. It was documenting. And she was the document. She didn't go to a hardware store. She went to the dusty little corner market on Decatur. She bought the heaviest hammer they had, a short, squat thing with a steel head. It felt cold and final in her hand. She climbed the stairs to her apartment. She didn't turn on the lights. The late afternoon sun slanted through the balcony door, painting the floor in long, deep shadows. And there it stood, in the corner. The cheval mirror, dark wood, flawless glass, looking, for all the world, like just a beautiful antique. She didn't hesitate. There was no ceremony. She walked up to it, raised the hammer, and swung. The sound wasn't a crash. It was a crack. A sharp, splintering report that seemed too loud for the room. A spiderweb of fractures exploded across the surface of the glass. Her own reflection shattered into 100 fragmented pieces. Each one showed a sliver of her wide, furious face. She swung again. And again. The glass gave way with a terrible, tinkling rain. Shards skittered across the hard pine floors. The frame splintered. She beat it until the mirror was nothing but a skeleton of wood. It was surrounded by a field of glittering, jagged pieces. She was breathing hard. Sweat stuck her shirt to her back. The hammer slipped from her fingers and thudded to the floor. Silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm. Empty. Clean. For the first time in weeks, she felt a lightness in her chest. It was over. She had broken the window. She gathered up the larger pieces of glass. She wrapped them in an old towel and threw the bundle into the dumpster in the alley. She swept the smaller shards into a dustpan. She erased it. That night, she slept. Not a fitful, fearful doze. A deep, Dreamless, heavy sleep. The sleep of the dead. No pressure. No 3 a.m. wake-up call. Just pure, uninterrupted dark. When she woke, sunlight was warm on her face. She felt a relief so profound it was almost like joy. She stretched. She smiled a little. She turned her head toward the corner where the mirror had been, just to savor the emptiness. And her smile died. The mirror stood there, whole, unbroken. The dark wood frame was seamless. The glass was flawless. Not a single crack, not a speck of dust. It gleamed in the morning light, tilted slightly, waiting. It looked exactly as it had the day she moved in. Chloe didn't scream. The sound caught in her throat, a dry, clicking gasp. She pushed herself out of bed, her legs weak. She walked over to it, her hand trembling as she reached out. Her fingertips touched the glass. It was ice cold. She stared at her reflection. It was her, 26, no new lines. But the eyes staring back, they were the eyes from the final photo. Old eyes, tired eyes, full of a knowledge she didn't want. That's the true violation, you see. It's not the monster you can break. It's the one that puts itself back together. The one that shows you your own defeat in perfect clear glass. She didn't try to break it again. What was the point? That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't look at the mirror. She refused. The clock ticked over to 3 a.m. The pressure came down, thicker than ever before. It pinned her to the mattress like a specimen. She couldn't move a muscle. But the mirror was across the room. This wasn't about the mirror anymore. This was about her. And then she felt it, a new sensation. A cold, heavy, metallic pressure circling her ankles. A biting, unforgiving chill that seeped through her skin and into the bone. It was the grip of iron, the weight of chains, in the perfect, paralyzed silence of her bedroom, shackles that weren't there closed around her legs. And she understood. The mirror was never the prison. It was just the display case. She was the artifact now. Chloe didn't sleep again. She just lay there, gripped by a terror so complete it felt like a new kind of paralysis. The cold, iron pressure on her ankles was gone with the morning light. But the memory of the sensation, the bite of it, the weight, that was bone deep. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a fact her body remembered. She waited for the sun to climb high enough to bleach the shadows from the corners. Then she moved. She didn't pack. She left everything. The books, the clothes, the laptop full of research, the beautiful, terrible furniture. She took her purse, her phone, and the car keys. She walked out of apartment 3B and down the hard pine stairs without a single look back. She didn't even lock the door. The drive to Baton Rouge was a 2-hour fugue state. She kept the windows down, letting the roar of the interstate fill the car. She tried to drown out the silence that had followed her out of the apartment. The silence that felt, even now, like it was sitting in the passenger seat. Her family was confused, then worried. She looked as her mother whispered to her father, ghastly. Her skin had a waxy, translucent pallor. There were bruised hollows under eyes that seemed decades older than her own. She told them it was a nervous breakdown. Too much stress, the thesis, the city. It was a lie that felt thin, but it was all she had. For 2 weeks, she slept on her childhood bed with the door open and a nightlight plugged into the wall. And slowly, like a phantom illness receding, her appearance began to revert. The sallowness faded. The deep lines softened back into the smooth skin of a 26-year-old. The gray at her temples vanished. It was as if the aging had been a poison and distance was the only antidote. Her body healed. Her mind did not. She developed a strict, silent routine. All mirrors in the house were covered with towels or sheets by sunset. She refused to look at her reflection in dark windows. She started wearing a digital watch with no glass face so she wouldn't catch a glimpse in its surface. The chronic insomnia set in, a permanent resident. She'd doze in shallow, fitful bursts during the day. But the night was for vigilance. And this is the part she confessed later in a voice so quiet you had to lean in to hear it. The part that tells you the curse wasn't in the mirror. It was in the seeing. Sometimes she would wake. Not from a dream, just wake. And the clock would read 3 a.m. The room would be still. The nightlight would glow. There would be no mirror to look at. But she would feel it. That old, familiar pressure settling over her limbs, not enough to pin her, but enough to remind her it could. And on her ankles, a faint, phantom ache. A circular, cold pressure. The memory weight of the shackles. They weren't there. She would reach down, touch her own skin, and feel nothing but warmth. But the sensation persisted. A ghost of a chain, an echo of a restraint that had been shown to her just once in perfect clarity. She had broken the window, but the draft was still getting in. So, that's where it ends. Or rather, that's where Chloe's part of it ends. She lives in Baton Rouge. She dropped out of her program. She works a day job in an office with no reflective surfaces. She is, by all accounts, safe, but you need to understand the final unsettling math of this. Chloe left. She broke the connection. She is, in every sense that matters, gone from that story. And the mirror, the dark, carved cheval mirror from the LaLaurie Mansion is not. It is still there, in Unit 3B of 1128 Royal Street. As of this recording, the apartment has been re-rented. The landlord, Mr. Saunier, thought the whole thing was hysterics. He found Chloe's abandoned things, cleared them out, and listed the place again. A new tenant moved in last month. A young couple, I'm told. An architect and a musician. They like the historic charm. They love the antique mirror. I don't know their names. I don't know if they felt the silence thicken at 3 a.m. I don't know if the woman in the shackles has found a new reflection to stand behind. All I know is this. A thing that can put itself back together after being smashed to pieces. That's a thing that is hungry. And a thing that is hungry does not stay hungry for long. So if you're listening to this, alone in the dark, and you feel a sudden, inexplicable chill, if the silence in your own room starts to feel less like silence and more like a held breath, don't look at the mirror. Just check the time. The tape has reached its end. I hope the stories tonight brought a pleasant chill to your spine as you drifted further into the dark. Thank you for braving the shadows here at the Sleep Paralysis tapes. If you are still awake, lying still in the quiet, remember to contact me with your own unsettling encounters so they can be added to our growing archive. As my voice fades away, let the silence of your room wrap around you completely. May your sleep be undisturbed, your doors remain locked, and your morning arrive safely. Until we open the tapes again, good night.